We're in for a night view.
Which one dropped this?
That's our girl. Now we know where we went for tracks and water for sure. There's two of them across the creek at the big rocks. It's a hard act to follow.
It sounds like he talks to us and they talk to each other.
Yeah. Right there, just see movement right through there.
And that was Ron Moorhead's Sierra Sounds there in the beginning before the intro of the show. And if you get a chance, definitely check out ronmoorhead.com. Pick up a copy of the Sierra Sounds. It's a very, very small portion of what you get with his collection. And they've always fascinated me. I figured, what the hell? It's my show. I can play whatever I want. So there's a little bit of the Sierra Sounds. And I love the Sierra Sounds. They fascinate me. If you're listening in your car, like on a Bluetooth or whatever, and you get home, plug in your headphones, you can really hear the creatures in the background. And I want to give a shout out to Natalie from Canada. Apparently a year ago, I promised her a shout out and I must have forgotten about it. I apologize, Natalie. I know it was recently your birthday. Happy late birthday. Thank you so much for listening to the show. Well, tonight we got a great show planned for you. We'll be talking to Sebastian, who is had an encounter, a very unexpected encounter in Idaho. He'll be sharing that with us tonight. We'll go to Utah, talk to Genevieve. She ran into the largest man she's ever seen before. We'll also talk to Kurt. Kurt is from Michigan, and he's got a lot of weird things going in and around his property. His very small child had an encounter, said he saw these 4 creatures running across the field, and they went out to investigate. Something threw something at the whole family. It's a very fascinating account. I'll let Kurt tell the story, and then we'll wrap up with Steve. I really wanted to have Steve on because Steve actually ran into a ball of light in Wisconsin. He was driving down the road. It was going the same speed he was, and it went up over his car and actually exploded. And when it exploded, it caused a lot of electrical interference with his car. And it makes me wonder, was that a ball of lightning or was it something more sinister? If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. If you get a chance, check out sasquatchchronicles.com. You can become a member and get additional shows. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Sebastian to the show. Sebastian, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Wes.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know you had 2 strange encounters in Illinois, but it wasn't until later in life when you're in Idaho you actually saw one of these things. If you would, I'd kind of like to start in Illinois. If you would, tell me what you were doing and what happened.
Okay. This was quite a few years ago. I'm 22 now. I was around 13 at the time. My dad had this house out by Staunton Lake, and me and my little brother, it was during the summer, so we didn't have nothing to do. Every day we'd walk out to the lake. We'd do some fishing. We'd walk down the spillway and walk the trails. And one day we were walking the trails out past the spillway, and we walked, I'm going to say a mile and a half. We were a good distance out into the woods. And my little brother stopped to rest for a little bit, and I kept walking. And I don't know, I only maybe put a half a football field of distance between my little brother and myself. And I was walking through, and I heard this, it sounded like a branch snap, like just a snap off to my right up the hill a little bit. And right after I heard that snap, I heard a grunt, or like it wasn't really a growl. It wasn't a grunt. It was like a oof, like that. That's the best I can describe it. Like it came from the chest, and it just rattled me to the bone. Like my heart sank, and I immediately turned around and started running. And my little brother at this point had started walking back to meet me, and I came running past him. And he was like, "Why are you running?" I said, "Run." And he was like, "Why? Why are we running?" I said, "Turn around and run. Just run." And we ran all the way back up to the main road and walked back to our house. And that was the first instance. And then about 3 weeks later, my brother didn't believe me when I told him while we were running after we got back to where I felt we were safe. I told him, and he didn't believe me. Well, about 3 weeks went by, and we went back out there, and we were doing some night fishing. And we had a lantern hanging in the tree, and we were fishing off in a little cove on one side of a cove. And the lantern the light shine from the lantern shine all the way across, basically to the tree line, so we could see the trees on the other cove, but nothing past that. We couldn't see up in the trees. And it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. We weren't having any luck, and so we just started playing around, throwing rocks and sticks and whatever we found laying around. We're just throwing them in the water, throwing them across the other side of the cove. And we quit for about 20 minutes, and we were about to start getting ready to pack up and leave. And then out of nowhere, we just noticed this big rock come flying out from the cove on the tree line on the other side, just past where we could see from the light. This big rock came flying out and landed close to us in the water. And I mean, this, from our side to the other side of the cove, had to be maybe 45, 50 feet. And that rock went from that tree line almost to us and hit down in the water. And both of those times I never seen anything. I just heard it and then had the rock thrown at us. And that's it for my Illinois experiences.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, though. You're out in the middle of the night. What throws rocks? You know, if you don't believe in Bigfoot, it must be people. But it's like I told you before, man, that just doesn't make any sense that someone would throw a rock, especially at night when people are fishing. You know, someone might whip out a gun and start shooting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And especially because like I told you in the email, I'm 6'5", 280 pounds. I've martial arts growing up, doing football, wrestling. Like, I'm a stocky guy. I have some muscle to me. There was no way I would have been able to throw that rock 10 feet, let alone 45, 50 feet. Like, it was a big rock.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now you moved to Idaho, and tell me about that, because this is where you actually got a good look at one of these things.
Yes, this is where I was actually able to see one. Like I was telling you earlier, I moved to Idaho in 2016, the year after I graduated high school. And my girlfriend and I at the time, we were living there, and her parents, they didn't know me very well, and they had accused me of stealing something of her sister's. And, you know, I'm not a thief. If I'm going to have something, I'm going to work for it. And I'm not going to. And it makes me mad to sit there and have somebody accuse me of doing something I didn't do. So I grabbed a pillow, grabbed a blanket, and hopped in our car. It was a little 2001 Honda Accord, little 4-door car. And I drove up to the gas station before leaving town. I bought a couple of waters and a pack of cigarettes because I knew I was going to, you know, trying to calm down. At the time, I was basically a chain smoker. I drove out about 8 to 10 miles outside of town on this road to a T, and then I turned left and went down half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, and then turned right onto a rock road. And then I wasn't on that rock road very long before I found the dirt road I turned off on. Maybe 2 or 3 minutes. I wasn't on that rock road very long. And then I found a dirt road off to the right to turn on. So I turned down that dirt road, and it took me down the side of this mountain out there. It was just a part of a range. It wasn't nothing like a particular mountain range. It was just a part of a little mountain range we had smack there in the middle of southeast Idaho. And I went down the trail, and at the bottom went down the road, the dirt road, and at the bottom of the dirt road was a big dirt circle, like a big turnaround spot. So I went down there, and down this mountain, I'll kind of try and lay it out for you. Down the side of this mountain, I came down, and I was right on the right side of this mountain. And then it was maybe a half mile wide of a valley, and then there was another mountain range on the other side. And in the middle of this valley, there was, I'll call it a small river or a large creek running through. And I'm sitting down there. The front of my car to the bank was about 6 to 8 feet. And then from the bank to the creek was about another 10 to 15 feet. But I was sitting there. I was there for maybe a half hour, 45 minutes. And I was playing on my phone, smoking cigarettes, trying to pass the time. I was playing Temple Run. I remember the shirt I was wearing, the pants, the shoes. I remember it's burned into my head, man. I was playing Temple Run, and something told me to look up from my phone and look out the windshield. I don't know. I just got this feeling in my body to look up, and I looked up, and it had to be 15, 20 feet from me in that creek. I could see from the very top of the buttocks up to the top of the head, and its back was facing me. And the arms, at first it really caught me off guard because I didn't see any arms down past the elbow, but they were kind of bowed out to the side, like it had its hands up by its mouth, like it was, I don't know, eating fish or mussels or clams or something that would have been in the creek for it to eat. And I sat there, and in all honesty, it wasn't really that long I was looking at it. I looked at it long enough and clear enough that I could see the muscle definition in its back, and it was like that of a really big bodybuilder, I don't want to say like a really toned bodybuilder, but like one of the bodybuilders that have like a layer of fat, but you can see the muscle underneath. And it was like a blackish grayish hair. The head was kind of a conical shape, but it wasn't a very exaggerated cone. It was kind of small, more like a dome, kind of. And I'm sorry, man. I'm getting goosebumps. I'm trying to. I just remember the detail and the muscle in the back. I didn't see any ears. I couldn't see any ears sticking from the side of its head. But I examined it that way for maybe 10 seconds, if that. It felt very long, but I doubt it was even that long. And something told me, flip your headlights on. So I flipped my headlights on, and the very instant I did that, it dropped out of sight. Like, there was no noise. It didn't vocalize when it dropped. It just dropped out of sight. But the speed at which it disappeared, it was almost instantaneous. And it just dropped out of my sight. And it took me a minute to register that it dropped out of sight. So I got close up and was looking, like with my face almost touching the windshield, trying to look out and see. Well, 6 to 8 feet in front of my car where the bank was, there were some bushes coming up. There were bushes right along that bank. And I was looking out in the distance, and I didn't notice it at first. But then I noticed something move in those bushes, and I kind of focused my focus to those bushes. I directed my focus to the bushes, and from the bushes, I'm sorry, man, this part terrifies me. I have nightmares about it. Look through the bushes, I seen eyes, but I didn't see the face. I saw, like, on us, it would be like halfway down the nose, on the bridge of the nose. I saw from like right there to right above the eyebrows. So it was just like the eye section of the face. And that's all I could see looking at me through this bushes. And the headlights were shining directly in its face. I didn't see, it surprised me that it got right in the headlights. But I didn't see any glow or glare or anything coming off the eyes. I just seen black eyes. Kind of, if you've ever seen Supernatural, kind of how like their demons are portrayed to have those pure black eyes.
Yeah, some people talk about the black-eyed kids, and yeah, I know what you mean. It's like, I think I had one witness say it was like a shark's eye.
Yeah, like how they flip their eyes black and before they attack. The eyes were just black, and there was very little, just around the very outline, like around the eyeball, around the edges, there was just a little bit of white. I don't know. In that, we were staring at each other because, like I said, my face was almost up against the windshield, and I was trying to see where it went, and then I noticed it there staring at me. And we stared at each other for what felt like minutes. It felt like minutes, but it couldn't have been any more than 3 seconds. It was just long enough for me to register that he was there. He was staring at me. I was staring at him. He probably wasn't happy because I stumbled upon him. So I turned the car on really quick, threw it in reverse, and I was not graceful with the gas pedal. I put the pedal to the floor, went in reverse as fast as I could, and then took off speeding back up that dirt road up the mountain. And then part of the road had a very steep curve to it, and when I was going around that curve, I almost slid the car off the side of the mountain. But I got up there, and I didn't have any service down there, so I couldn't, if anything would have happened, or if it would have tried to attack the car or anything like that, I wouldn't have been able to do anything. Like, I was in the middle of a valley in between two mountains. There was nothing around for miles. And I can't find the words to explain the fear that put in me. That, because like, even seeing it standing there, I wasn't that scared. I was surprised. I was taken off guard. I was like, what is that? Because, out there, I was an hour and 45 minutes away from Yellowstone National Park. Like, I know there's bears out there. There's moose. There's elk. I have seen all those things out there. It was none of those. Like, I've been 15 feet away from a grizzly bear, and it was not a grizzly bear. And that along, I'll try and use that grizzly bear as a reference to size. I mean, because if you've been up close to a grizzly bear, you can appreciate how big a grizzly bear is. But being 15 to 20 feet away from this, I just felt, what's the word I'm looking for? Helpless. Like, all it had to do was just make a move, and I wouldn't have been able to do a thing about it. I mean, the shoulder width from shoulder to shoulder, like I said, I'm a big guy. I'm about 2.5 feet from shoulder to shoulder, and this was easily 2 to 3 times my width. I mean, it was wide, it was massive, and just, like I said, I could tell it was very muscular, but it was not like super cut, super toned. It was like one of the bodybuilders that still have a beer gut.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I get it. It's interesting, though. It makes me wonder if it stumbled into that creek and didn't even realize you were there until you hit your lights. And then it was like, oh, crap. It sounds like you kind of surprised each other. Do you get the feeling you were there? Do you get the feeling like it knew you were there and it just went about its business? Or do you think it was just as surprised as you were?
I think it was just as surprised as I was. I don't think it knew I was there. I mean, like I said, for about 30, 45 minutes, I was paying attention to my phone, smoking a cigarette. I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings, so he easily could have came down from somewhere and been doing his thing, not realize I was there. I didn't realize he was there until, I don't know what it was. Just, I had a gut feeling that said, look up and look up now. So I did, and I seen him standing there.
What'd you do that night? Did you go back to your girlfriend's parents, or did you sleep somewhere else?
I went back to my girlfriend's parents. I was terrified. I sped. If I would have passed the cop, I probably would have went to jail, because I was not going easy on that throttle. I wanted to put as much distance away from me and it as fast as I possibly could.
Yeah, I understand. Did you tell anyone about what you'd seen?
I had told my girlfriend's mom, because her and I have had conversations about Bigfoot before. Like, me growing up, I've always grown up with an outdoors background, and I've always believed in Bigfoot. I remember being 4 or 5 years old watching the Patty film for the first time with my dad. And like, I've always believed, but I never thought I'd ever come across it, because I always thought that, they were up in Washington, California, Oregon, up in Canada. I always thought they were over there. And I had heard of, reports down in Florida of the skunk ape. But, I never thought that out there in the middle of nowhere in Idaho, I mean, it kind of makes sense. It's the middle of nowhere, but I'm going up in the mountains to sleep for the night. I didn't think that was the last thing in the world I would have ever thought to run into.
Yeah, and they're definitely in Idaho. The creature's behavior, it really interests me, because it didn't run off. Not only did it not run off, it turned around and faced the car, which would make me nervous. Most wild animals will run off the minute they're surprised or whatever. And
that's kind of why because once it dropped and I got close to the windshield, like, it was like I said, I was miles outside of town. I don't remember what phase of the moon it was, but it was fairly bright. There was no light pollution, so there was tons of stars, so I could see a good amount without my headlights. So I was trying with my headlights on. I got close to the windshield to try and see if I could see where it had ran off to see if I could, for sure knew that it had left. And then I noticed it staring at me, and that's what scared me. Because when I seen him there, even when he was staring at me, I don't know. I don't think he was staring at me with aggression. I don't feel like, I didn't see that in his eyes. I didn't see aggression. It looked like he was just like startled, like, hey, who are you? What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here at this time.
I can imagine. And generally, if you go off of your gut, generally you're right, in the way you're feeling. What do you think that Sasquatch is, Sebastian? What's your opinion?
I've thought a lot about it. And in my own opinion, I mean, I've been listening to your show a lot. And yesterday I listened to the episode with Stroud, and I really respect his opinion. That is actually a very deep thought look into it. But me, myself, I feel like it's a lost species of mankind. We just lost him somewhere along the way. I mean, looking at it, it looks like an ape, like a monkey. And it looked very ape-like, but the eyes and like the posture and I don't know, like the instinct to duck down and hide instead of instantly bolt when I turn the lights on. Like it just felt, and even looking into its eyes, I just felt like I'm looking at some form of human or humanoid.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. Did it affect you? I mean, did you ever, I don't know if you camped before this or hunted, but did you ever go out? I know you fished. Did you ever go back out after dark, or did it not really affect you that way?
To this day, last year I was living up in Northern California, 20 miles south of the Oregon border. And, there's forests and that's mountain country, and like that's my go-to thing. I love hiking in the mountains. I love taking a stroll through the forest. I love nature. And that was even me before this happened. But after this happened, I will not go up in the mountains or out in the wood. I will not go alone. I refuse to go alone, and I will not go at night.
Yeah, it's hard to blame me on that, man. It's really hard to blame me. It didn't really seem like the creature was really wanting to attack you, but who knows what its intentions were if you wouldn't have left. The fact that I didn't leave.
And that's what really startled me is it played I don't know. I feel like it played a test for ground. Like, you're not supposed to be here. This is my territory. I'm not quite mad at you, but what are you doing here? Why are you here? What are you doing sitting up there in your car?
Yeah, I understand the way you feel, man. It's a fascinating account. I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share it.
I really appreciate you having me come on. Like that story I've only told 3 people. Now you and all your listeners. My wife, she doesn't really believe. She kind of makes fun of me every time I talk about it. And a bunch of my buddies, they don't believe. But so the people I'm around, besides my dad's side of the family, they don't really believe. So I don't talk to anybody. I don't want to be ridiculed. But just listening to your, like I said, last Friday, my dad tuned me on to your show, and Sunday morning I started listening to it. I listened to your show for 13 hours straight that day. Like, that's all I did that day.
Jeez, man. Yeah.
Like, I can't get enough of it. It's relaxing. Your show is almost very therapeutic to me, to be able to hear other people's stories and witnesses and accounts. And it just, I don't know. I really do not know how to describe it, but it's very therapeutic for me to be able to listen to.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words, man, and thank you again for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Well, I want to welcome Genevieve to the show. Genevieve, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here, and I'm fascinated to hear this account. Now, this happened in Utah. If you would you just kind of start from the beginning? Tell us kind of what you were doing and what happened.
Sure. So, I was just kind of driving home after dropping my kids off at school, and we kind of live in a neighborhood that's backed up against the Wasatch Mountain Range. And there's state land behind us, and it just goes on for miles and miles. So it's kind of fun being the last little community against that land. And it's a nice little hilly area. And I was just driving home and kind of taking in the scenery, always looking for animals as I'm doing that. And there happened to be about probably 24 deer down in the field below our neighborhood. And I thought, oh, that's so fun. I love this. This is such an amazing place. And I'm always hoping to see something kind of bigger, more, always on the lookout for a cougar, but we'll see if that ever happens. And then like elk and moose I've seen up before as well. And as I was kind of scanning the mountains, I looked towards the roads that I was headed towards. I kind of looked to the left, and I noticed this enormous guy standing there, and I thought, what's that hunter doing? As I saw him, I just immediately thought, hunter, he's checking out the deer in the valley, because he was just like looking into the valley. And I kind of thought to myself, does he have a partner down there? Is he going to like scare the deer up? What are they doing, And why isn't he wearing any orange? Because he was just solid black. It looked like a big black puffy coat, big black hood on, and just dark and huge. And I kind of thought to myself, well, don't judge. You're literally wearing a black puffy coat and black pants. So, okay. So I kind of kept driving, and I lost sight of him because there's curves and turns and hills and stuff like that. But I was just absolutely fascinated with what this person was doing on the hill. And I kind of got back to my house, pulled down the driveway, and gathered my stuff. I was going to go clean at my neighbor's house. And I was peeking through the scrub oak because all the leaves had fallen, so you can kind of see between the houses and see through the hills. There had been a lot of snow, so the hills were really white, and so it really was a stark contrast between this big, enormous guy and like kind of the white and the brushiness of the scrub oak. And I kept kind of thinking to myself, like, man, I wish I had like binoculars. I wish I could get a closer look at this guy and kind of spy on him, because I just couldn't put together what he was doing. So I decided, well, I'll walk up and try and get a better view at the top of the road. And so I walked up the driveway and down the road a bit, and I had a much better view. And I'm just kind of standing there watching him, just thinking like, oh, I'm gonna watch the news this weekend, or check the news and see if anybody said that there were shots fired in our neighborhood or something, because I thought, this guy is up to no good. Like, what is he doing? He's just staring in the valley. And I kind of thought to myself as I was watching, like, what is he? And before I could really think the word doing, his shoulders, like full swing, lined up with me, like squared up to me. And it was just this bomb of energy, like a line from me to him. I looked over my shoulders because I was like, me? Are you looking at me? Because it felt so direct and so like calculated, like I am turning to you. And I didn't know what to do. I was really scared at that point, because there was just this energy that just made my heart pound. And
can I back up real quick, Genevieve? So
yeah.
You're driving through the woods, and so did you drive up to where he was at?
So when I passed where he was at, I couldn't see because there was a big house in the way. And so I didn't see him when I drove past. Like, I was craning my neck and like trying to see like what this guy was doing. But there was a house. Like the way the neighborhood is, these houses are like built up against the mountain, and it's almost like you have to carve into the mountainside to build a house. So it's kind of straight up.
I gotcha. So you're trying to find him at this point. You're trying to. Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So I'd found him again at the top of the road. Like I was staring at him again when I got to the top of the road, and I was watching him, and I just kind of thinking in my head all these little thoughts about what he's doing and, you know, what he's there for. and the whole time I just kind of thought, this is just a hunter. Like, what's he doing? You know, you can't hunt right there. Got to get further back, you know? And so, I could see him directly from where I was out on the road. From about waist up the whole time, I could see from waist up where he was, and he was just kind of same thing, like looking, like it just felt like he was looking right at me and seeing me on the road. And it's a really quiet community. There were no cars out. There were no people out. There was just nothing happening on the roads.
And how far away from you is he?
I tried to figure this out because my dad wanted to know. I would say maybe about 300 yards, 400 yards. It was a distance.
I gotcha.
It was a distance, but it was big enough that, like, there's trails cut right above our neighborhood, and you can see people walking up there. You can see dogs walking up there, you know, and you can, if it was somebody you knew, you would recognize them, you know. And I felt like if this was somebody I knew, I should be able to, like, see this, like, recognize this person. But I just couldn't.
Was there any details that you remember besides being all black? I realize he's 300 yards away.
No, and that was something that I kept thinking about. Like, I wish I had a pair of binoculars. But I felt like if I ran into the house, like, I would lose them. And so I just didn't. I just kind of stayed and just watched. And he just kind of kept staring in the valley the whole time until all of a sudden it felt like he just focused right on me.
And so he's looking at you now. What happens next?
Yeah. I'm feeling pretty nervous now. Like, now my heart's really pumping, and I'm really feeling like this is direct at me. And I'm thinking, can he see me? Like, well, you can see him. He can see you. It works both ways. And I just think, okay, just stand your ground. Like, don't move. Like, this was like an animal. You would just kind of, you know, get big, whatever. And so I just kind of stood there, and it felt like forever. And it was probably about a good 30-second stare. And I thought, you know, if this is a hunter and he pulls up a scope or something to look at me, I'll get out of there. But I didn't, you know, nothing like that happened, obviously. But, like, I just was looking at him like, don't blink, don't, you know, I just felt like I don't lose connection. And I don't know what was happening, but it almost looked like he was starting to crouch or bend. And it's the worst description, but it was mind-boggling at the time. It almost looked like he just kind of disappeared before my eyes. And I was so shocked and so spooked. And I got really scared at that point and thought, I got to get out of here. Like, I don't want him to come track me down or find me. That was, you know, I'm trying to, like, walk up and down the road a little bit, see if I can get a better view, tiptoe, like, on my tiptoes. I'm just really spooked and really shocked. And I just was really glad that I don't know why I took comfort in the fact that I was going to my neighbor's house to clean and not home, but I did. So it was just kind of very unsettling for the rest of the day.
Yeah, I can imagine. Did he drop down or did he disappear?
It felt like a disappear. And it's just, I couldn't tell if he was going to bend or move, but it almost looked like I blinked and he was gone. That's why I don't know I don't have a better explanation for it. And it just sounds bizarre, but it's the best explanation I have. It just felt like I blinked and I lost him.
I'm curious on his size. A lot of times, you know, when you see a man 300 yards away, he looks tiny. Did you get that impression looking at this thing?
No. Like, the minute I saw him, I thought that is a huge person. And that's why, I think I immediately thought hunter in, like, full, like, maybe like a big puffy coat, because he was just, the shoulders were just enormous. I just felt like this is a really, really big guy.
Yeah. Did you tell anyone after this encounter?
No, no. I kind of had, the day picked up and I kind of got on, and I didn't tell anyone until a few weeks later when I had kind of settled a little bit about it. I'd seen a video on the news that there was a sighting, a Sasquatch sighting, Bigfoot sighting in Provo Canyon, and when I watched that video, I was like, that is what I saw. And I kind of, that whole feeling of like fast heartbeat, like stomach drop, everything happened again, and I felt like I was like reliving the whole situation again. And I didn't tell anyone, maybe for about almost 2 weeks, 10 days, 2 weeks, something like that. And I told my husband, and he's sweet, but he doesn't necessarily believe in all the things I believe in. And he just said to me, no, you need to tell your dad. You need to call your dad. And so I called my dad the next day, and he said to me, this is a couple weeks after the encounter, he just said, you can't go back up in those woods again. Because I take him up there when he visits, and we go hiking, and the kids and I go hiking up there, and it's a beautiful place. It's great. There's a ton of people who hike and ride bikes and horses and things up there. So, but he was like, they can get down on all fours, and I'm like, I know. So my dad definitely has been a good supporter.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, what do you think that Sasquatch is, Genevieve?
My personal opinion is that he is some kind of maybe more like biblical lost soul type of a thing, but that's only part of me. Part of me can't, believes that there are, male and female of them out there and little ones of them out there. I don't know how it all works. So I'm curious to know more, but that's kind of what I think.
No, it's good. It's a good theory. Be careful going out there. Obviously he wasn't interested in you. He might have been interested in the deer down in that valley. But you never know when you get too close. He was definitely focused on you. I'd definitely be careful. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing it.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's a real pleasure.
Well, next up on the show, I have Kurt. Kurt, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being here.
No problem, Wes.
Yeah, I appreciate you being here. And I know there's a lot of strange things going on in your current property, including your son telling you about these creatures he saw. But all of this actually started back on a property close to where you live now. If you would you just kind of start there? Tell us what was going on that property and just kind of walk us into what happened, if you would.
Yeah, so we started at our old house, which was about 10 miles away from where we currently live. We moved a few years ago, but this was about 6-7 years ago, 2012, 2013. My oldest son and I were entering the woods in the morning. This was before the sun came up. We were heading to our hunting spot in the fall for deer hunting. My son was 12, 13 years old at the time, and he had a crossbow, which is legal here in Michigan at that age even. And he sat in a tent, which was 40, 50 yards away from my tree stand. So he was in direct view of me, and I kind of, had him close to me so I could keep an eye on him and see what was going on right there. But we were walked out the back door, walking out into the woods behind the house, and there's a pond. It's about 100 yards behind our house. There's a pond there, and we're approaching my tree stand, and just kind of walking single file, and from the other side of the pond, which was probably it's a real small pond, about 30 yards away, I guess, we heard a whooping noise. It was roughly 7-8 consecutive whoops right in a row, and It was like, I'll try and make the noise. It was like a whoop, whoop. It was like that, but really, really, really loud. It was kind of like the volume of a really loud blowhorn where they have those sirens on there, the alarm, if you push it. It kind of sounded like that volume, maybe even a little louder, but just really loud. And we just both stopped dead in our tracks, just completely froze still because we heard this noise. We had no idea what it was, completely confused. I wouldn't say we were scared, probably because we didn't know what it was. We didn't know if there's anything to be scared of. But just like 30 seconds, complete silence. The whole woods just went completely silent. It was completely dead and calm. And after about 30 seconds, I looked at my son and said, I don't know what that was, but we might as well keep on going. So we kept on going. And of course, thinking about it, while we're out there for the whole morning hunt and come back in and, walking back in, we're like, what, that was a weird noise. What was that? Was that like, a bird or an owl or something? Didn't know. And telling my wife when we got inside, hey, we heard this really loud noise and mimicking it. And she was like, oh, it's probably a coyote. Anyone who's heard a coyote knows that they don't whoop, they holler and, that kind of stuff. But it definitely wasn't a coyote. I've seen coyotes. I've heard coyotes. I know what a coyote is, what they sound like. And definitely wasn't that. The only thing I thought it could have been would be some sort of bird. I know there's whooping cranes and, but they kind of, they don't really like whoop. It made the puh sound at the end of the whoop. It's like you need lips to make that noise. So, I know that now, but looking back, so that day, I spent the better part of that day, the rest of that day on YouTube, looking at, different bird noises, owl noises, different animals, just trying to search what that noise was. Cause it was really loud and really confusing to me for someone who spends a lot of time in the woods and never heard it before. I wanted to know what was making that noise. So I stumbled across a video where it said, what I typed into YouTube was something along the lines of animals that whoop in Michigan or whooping in Michigan, something like that. And down in the feed, I saw one that said Sasquatch or Bigfoot, I don't remember, Sasquatch or Bigfoot whooping in Michigan. And I was like, well, that's interesting. So I played the video, and the exact same whooping noise, but further off in the distance. It was probably one of the researchers out there in the woods, and they're recording this. So I called my son over, said, hey, listen to this. He goes, yep, that's exactly what we heard. So I called my wife over, go, this is the noise we heard. She goes, oh, that's interesting. I said, that's exactly what we heard. I said, this guy says it's Bigfoot. And she just laughed. Now, it was probably a coyote or something. You guys don't know what you're talking about. So that was kind of what started the whole Bigfoot Sasquatch fascination for me. Right there, it was kind of the only explanation I could come up with, but with looking all over the internet and everything, trying to find the same noise was, at the time, one clown saying that it was Sasquatch. So
yeah, I hear you. It happens to a lot of people, though. They can't figure out where the sound comes. What's making this? Coyotes don't whoop. You and I both know that. But it is fascinating when people go and start searching for the sound they heard, and then it's a reported Bigfoot sound. Was there more that happened on that property? Yeah.
So right around the same time, I had another incident myself, which was, we did quite a bit of campfires in the backyard on weekend evenings with the kids, just hanging out, roasting hot dogs and marshmallows and making s'mores. And we did that one evening, and we're hanging out, and the evening was coming to a close, and time to put the kids to bed. So the wife went inside to put the kids to bed, and I stayed out and finished off my drink and had to relieve myself, and didn't want to go into the house and mess up bedtime and rile the kids up and that kind of thing. So I just went right to the edge of the woods and just gonna use nature, do nature and nature there. So I was doing that, and right from that same pond area, something growled at me, and it was right around the same time trying to figure all that stuff out, and it was a deep guttural growl. And the best way I could describe it would be kind of like an African lion. Not, when they start to roar, they don't just roar. They build up to it like a roar, something like that. But it was kind of like a grunting growl, directed right towards me, and it was 4 or 5 of them as I was standing there, and it just kind of creeped me out. I didn't know what it was. I know raccoons will snarl and growl a little bit, but it was a lot deeper than that. I've heard pissed off raccoons fighting and all that kind of stuff in the woods, and I don't think it was that. Again, I don't know what that was, but with the whooping noise right around the same time, and I guess my best guess would be, now I think it was probably a Sasquatch standing there by the pond again, and I approached it and, was literally probably pissing in his water, so he probably didn't like it. So, I heard that, and I just said, that's creepy. I don't know what that is. And I, at that point, just turned right back around and went inside. So, but that's what happened there, at that house. And we moved out of there a couple of years after that.
Now, this other property, how far away from you is that other piece of property that you moved into?
Yeah, it's about 10 miles. So
relatively close.
Right in the same area. Yeah, right in the same area. So kids still go to the same school, all that kind of stuff. So we're living still in the same general area.
And tell me what happened there, because I know your son said something to you that caught your attention.
Yeah, so this just happened recently, just a couple months ago. The wife and I, we went out for, a date night, and we came back, from dinner, pulling the driveway, and the kids are running around the yard, which isn't abnormal. But they came running up to us as we were getting out of the car, and they're like, Dad, TJ saw 4 white creatures out in the field. We're gonna go investigate. We're gonna look, come with us. I'm like, what? What do you mean? Yeah, he saw 4 white creatures. I'm like, okay. Didn't think much of it. So then, he comes running by. I go, hey, what'd you see? He goes, I saw 4 white creatures. I was up by the, he just starts rambling on, just going into the story, basically saying I was up by the paint can. So we have this paint can hanging from a tree by the hill about 80 yards off my deck, which I just use as a kind of like target practice plinking, shooting at. So he's like, I was standing up by the paint can, and I looked down into the field, and I saw 4 people walking through. He thought it was people. He thought it was his oldest brother. So he said, I thought it was James. So I went down to the field at the edge of the trail, and I said, hey, James. 3 of them were running, and then the 4th one was walking, and it looked at, it basically, when I yelled at it, you didn't say it looked at me, but basically when I yelled at it, it started running too, and they went up this hill over here. I was like, okay, they were white? He goes, yeah, they were blank. This is how he described it. They were blank, white. I'm like, okay. Said, and they were on 4 feet? No, they were walking on 2 feet. Okay, that's interesting. I said, how big were they? They're bigger than James. They're bigger than me. We're about the same height. He's like maybe an inch taller than me, my oldest boy. I said, well, bigger than him, like taller than him? Yes, bigger than him. I go, well, what about bigger than me? Well, they're bigger than James. I go, well, wider than me? Because I'm obviously wider, being older. Well, yeah, they were huge. And they were on 2 feet. I'm like, seriously? He's like, yeah, they came right here, and they went right up here, so he's showing us where they went. I said, well, how did they run? Show me how they ran. Mimic how they were running. And he is kind of hard to describe, but the best way I could describe it is if you asked a kid to run like a chimpanzee or a gorilla, they'd probably bend over at their waist a little bit, lean a little bit forward, put their arms out in front of them, and, kind of run funny, with their knees a little bent. And that's basically what he did. He said they were running like this. He kind of bent over, had his arms, bent in front of him, out in front of him, and just went running. I said, at this point, so I'm thinking, oh, holy crap. You saw 4 white Bigfoot walking through our field, So I'm like, did you see their feet? So I asked him, I said, did you see their feet? He says, no, I couldn't see their feet. Their feet looked like he's like, their feet looked like they never left the ground, like they were gliding, like when they were running. He said that they kept their feet, kind of how he described it, like close to the ground, but made it sound like they were gliding. So we were, obviously, everyone was up in a tizzy, and we're all out there and we're looking, and he's showing me where it went, and I'm looking at the ground. I'm out there looking, like hoping I'm going to find the classic 18-foot footprint that, could take a picture of and be, clear evidence or anything like that. But, nothing like that. A lot of deer tracks, and, there's still a lot of leaves out there on the ground from last fall, and litter and debris just from the, natural, forest land. So, I didn't see anything like that. So I'm kind of following the trail where he said they went. My wife and, a couple of our other kids, there's probably about 6 or 7 of us out there. It was just getting dark. It was like at the twilight area, and they're out in the field, and everyone's just kind of looking around. And suddenly something from the other end of the field came flying through the trees. We heard it hit, a little bit of like tree branches, and then something hit the ground with a thud, with the power and the loudness of something that I can't even imagine what it was. It just, I don't even know. It sounded like it had to have been like 400 or 500 pound object, something like that, hitting the ground. Again, like the first time that we had 6-7 years ago, but this was, the rest of us too. And everybody stopped. Everybody looked in that direction, and it was like complete dead, awkward silence for like 30 seconds. And everyone just froze in their tracks and looked over there. And then I finally said, that was scary. And everyone's like, holy cow, what was that? It was just, I can't even describe it. It was just such a loud thud. Like maybe like, I guess the best way now I'm thinking about it to describe it would be, how like if you got a big excavator and they take the bucket, curl it up, and hit the ground with it.
Yeah.
It almost like to that magnitude. So, but it just something, in my opinion, was we were out there after he saw 4 of them going through the field. But this, this is on the other end. He saw them going that direction, and on the other end, basically from where he says they were coming from, is where this got thrown from.
Did you ever see what it was, Kurt? What was thrown at you?
No. So this, like I said, this was getting dark, and then after that happened, and at this point, being a couple months ago, I've listened to your shows and heard other accounts at this point in my life. So I kind of was like, the classic something getting thrown at you. Guys, we got to go. So we all went inside at that point, because I'm, if he saw 4 of them and something just got thrown at us, I'm not gonna be out there with my family putting all our lives at risk. If these things are surrounding us. So we went up to the house, and then the next day we went back out, me and a bunch of the kids, and we went back out over that area, and we were walking around and looking for like a big log or a big rock or something that looked misplaced or that wasn't, in that area that I knew of before, and I could not find anything. We had our land logged, I think it was last spring. So there's still a lot of tree tops laying down on the ground, and log pieces that they didn't take and that kind of stuff kind of scattered throughout all over anyways. So it's not the cleanest section of woods at this point because of that. But I searched long and hard. I was out there for a couple hours just kind of combing that whole area looking for stuff, because I wanted to explain, again, what was going on. I picked up a rock that was probably a little bit bigger than a bowling ball that I could pick up, and I, threw it a couple feet. That's really all I could do with it, in front of my kids, and it hit the ground, and it thuds a little bit, but not even close. I looked at my daughter, I said, that's a big rock, and that wasn't even close to the thud we heard. And she was like, yeah, no, whatever we heard was way bigger. Kind of funny, I was talking about this last night with my wife, at dinner, and I kind of had a little theory about this. I almost wonder if, there was one in a tree and it jumped down. I mean, when they hit the ground, I don't know what kind of force they would hit the ground with.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking when you and I were talking the other day, and then, we've talked a couple times, and I was kind of thinking the same thing. Maybe one jumped out of a tree. A lot of times when people hear them come out of a tree, they'll describe that I felt the earth shake type feeling. Like I felt the thud when it hit. And especially if you're not finding rocks or anything around there, it's a good theory. I mean, a log being thrown or, finding, oh, that's what was throwing at us. If you didn't find it, maybe it did jump out of a tree. It's hard to say.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll run with it. But
yeah, and it's a different son too. I mean, this isn't the son that heard the whooping. This is your youngest
correct.
boy. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. So my oldest is 19, just turned 19. And this is my youngest who's 8. So yeah. Yeah. So he had no knowledge of, he was just a young baby when those first instances were happening. And, if in my, too, is I know my son, I know he wasn't lying. I know he was very passionate when he was describing the story. He definitely saw, and he described them as 4 white creatures. He didn't say I saw Bigfoot, I saw Sasquatch. He said I saw 4 white creatures. They were on 2 feet. And to this day, if someone like one of my other kids will say, TJ, remember that time you saw 4 Bigfoot? He'll say it wasn't Bigfoot. He says it wasn't Bigfoot. Just because that's his personality and he wants to be different and that kind of thing. So
yeah.
But he describes them like anyone would describe a Bigfoot. And if an 8-year-old kid like that's going to make up a story, why would he say 4 white ones?
Yeah, you wouldn't think he'd go with white. Yeah, and it's like I told you before, my favorite witnesses, honestly, are kids because they'll give you details. They'll tell you what they saw. And some of the best descriptions I've ever heard were from little kids. And for obvious reasons, I don't put them on the air. But, some of the best encounters I've ever heard, coming up to kids' window, kids seeing them on a farm, and then parents are like, hey, we talked to my son. And I'm like, your son's not lying, or your son or daughter's not lying. They have way too many descriptions just to make it up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, no, I like I said, I definitely know he's not lying. He saw 4 white creatures going through our field, whether that's Bigfoot or Sasquatch, I believe it is, but, like you say all the time, until it's, someone shoots one and it's in our garage to study, I guess we don't know for sure. So
yeah, no, it's a fascinating account. I'd definitely be careful on that property. Thank God they're running the opposite direction instead of towards your son,
Yeah.
What do you think that Sasquatch is, Kurt?
Yeah. So my belief is it's I think it's just a monkey, a creature created by God that's just lives in the woods, and it's a large primate that's really good at hiding and flesh and blood, and really nothing more than that. That's where I'm at with it. So.
Yeah, and I really appreciate you coming on, Kurt. If anything new happens out there, will you keep me updated? Let me know what happens out there.
I sure will.
Thanks again for coming on, Kurt. Well, next up, I want to welcome Steve to the show. Steve, thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Wes. I'm a big fan. I just wanted to let you know I've been listening to your show for a couple of years, and I think you do a great job.
I appreciate saying that. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming on. I know we want to get to the ball of light that you ran into in Wisconsin. But before we get into that, you kind of grew up in Ohio. If you would kind of explain to the audience what you heard. What were you doing and what did you hear?
Well, I've grown up, kind of in the Midwest, Michigan, Ohio, Wisconsin. And my grandparents lived in a little town called Posen up in northern Michigan. And we were up there for the summer one year. I believe it was either 78 or 79. There was we were all just sitting around in this, it's a nice cabin. It's not kind of a shack, more of a home. All of a sudden, we heard this absolutely just amazing noise, and it sounded like the air horns that they used to use for like an air raid siren. And it was across the lake. It's called Sunken Lake. It's about an eighth of a mile wide, and the noise was just so tremendously loud. It shook the windows. And, I looked at my father and my grandfather, and I was like, what is that? And they're like, oh, that's a moose. And it was really unnerving, and it just kind of shook you to your core. And, you're a young kid. Oh, Dad says it's a moose. It's a moose. Well, it was about 30 minutes later, give or take, and we heard it again. And this one was on the on the other side of the lake, and so it was on our side of the lake this time. And this time, it rattled the windows, and it just inspired terror. And I said to my dad, I'm like, do we need to get the guns? This is hunting family. Do we need to get the guns? And my dad was, oh no, it's just a moose, nothing to worry about. We didn't really hear anything after that, so didn't really think much about it until I was listening to your show one day, and I heard that Ohio call. And when I did, it chilled me to the bone, because I was like, that's a noise I heard when I was a kid. So that inspired me to kind of get online, and man, I listened for about a week. I listened to every single noise recorded in the woods ever. I listened to, moose and elk and wildcat, and nothing comes close to making that noise. Nothing that I've ever heard. And it was a one-time shot. It was a one-time event up there. But when I started looking into it, I happened to pull up a BFR site, and just a week earlier, someone had an encounter in a little town called Hillman, which is only about 7.5, maybe 8 miles as the crow flies from where we were at. And that report was a sighting with vocalizations.
Yeah, and for the audience, this is what I played. This is the Ohio howl. Is that what you heard? I mean, is that identical to what you heard that day?
Wes, like I said, it absolutely chilled me to the bone when I heard that, because it was identical. I mean, it had that long kind of it sounds like an air raid siren almost, but you could tell it wasn't mechanical. It was biologic. It was a creature that was making it.
It really is one of those sounds that, it's hard to place, but as far as being an animal, I don't know that a moose actually makes a sound like that. But what's fascinating about that piece of audio is I've heard people in Washington State say they've heard it. I've heard people in California say they've heard that exact same sound. Texas, East Coast. So we know it's a known sound, and there's nothing else that really links up to it. And it is loud. When you hear it, you're like, oh, Jesus, what is that,
Wes, I was in a house, like I said, it's a house in the woods, and I could not even imagine hearing that outside the house, and like I said, these were far away. I mean, these weren't close, but the power that they had was just, I can't imagine anything shy of an elephant having lungs that could manage that.
You're definitely right. And I'm kind of curious. So this kind of happens in Ohio, and then many years later, you run into the ball of light. And I kind of find this fascinating because, well, I'll let you kind of start from the beginning. If you would, tell us what you were doing and what did you see? What happened?
Well, I was coming home from work. It was It was rather, well, it was probably about 7:30-ish. And it was, and I hate to say it, but it was on Halloween night. And that kind of bugs me because it's like, oh, it was a Halloween prank. No. But I was coming home. I was driving down I-43. I was heading south. And I was just north of a town called Sheboygan, Wisconsin. There's a small dip in the road. Well, it's probably about a half a mile, maybe 3/4 of a mile in length. This dip, and it dips down to the Pigeon River. And the Pigeon River is just a tiny little stream at the bottom of this dip. And as I'm cresting the downward area, I notice in my kind of right-hand field of view that there's this light that wasn't there before. And for a moment I thought it was a street light, but the light was different. It wasn't like projecting. It was almost like there was this glow, but the light was almost kind of contained in the light. It wasn't like a spotlight shining down on anything, and it wasn't really illuminating anything. At first I thought it was oh, they got a new street light, but the light just looked kind of different. So it drew my attention. And as I was looking at it, I realized it was moving. And I'm doing probably about 60 miles an hour. And it was going probably about as fast as I was. So I wasn't catching up on it as quickly as I thought I should have if it was a stationary object. And then I realized it was probably about, it was something you could easily wrap your hands around. So it was somewhere between the size of a softball and a basketball. And it was floating just above the power lines. And it was probably 1 to 2 feet above the power lines. And it was moving exactly in line with the power lines. And as I came down, I really locked onto it. And I started to slow down a little bit. And it had kind of say like a whitish, bluish glow to it. But it was bright, but the light didn't travel. Like it didn't illuminate anything. And that was the thing that was really odd about it. Because, generally when you see like a street light, you can see the illumination on the ground, and it wasn't doing anything like that. The light seemed very different, very kind of ambient and not projected. So as I was driving, I come to the point where it's kind of obscured by the roof of my car, or it's almost obscured by the roof of my car. And just a second before I saw it obscured, or it became obscured, I saw it shoot off on an angle, and the power lines actually kind of form a Y right at the Pigeon River, and it followed the second one that shoots off towards Sheboygan. And if you actually go on Google Maps and you pull up Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and you look at I-43 and the Pigeon River, you can actually see the power line. You can see the power tower where it breaks off, and that's exactly where it broke off. It broke off, and it started heading towards Sheboygan. Then it became obscured by the roof of my car because I was passing underneath it. And the moment that I passed underneath it, all of a sudden there was this flash of light, and I can only assume that it exploded. And when this light flashed, it illuminated the inside of my car enough where I could tell that something had happened. And not only that, but my radio on my car went out for about, I'd say 30 to 45 seconds. Just really, really intense static. And then it came back. So as I was exiting the valley, I immediately started looking in my mirrors to see if, that thing was still traveling towards Sheboygan, and there was nothing there. So I can only assume that it exploded or imploded or something like that. There was no noise. I didn't hear a noise other than the static on the radio. And just to let you know, I was actually listening to you on the radio as a podcast at the time.
Yeah. I always wonder what those balls of light are. I know sometimes people think that it's a ball of lightning, and which is very, very rare. But the way it was traveling and then it kind of turned, and what color was it?
Kind of like a bluish white glow. And it was the really weird thing about it was that the glow was, I'd kind of say, brighter than a street light, but it didn't seem to give off as much light as a street light. Like I said, it just seemed to be like an ambient glow and not like a projected, like, you know, when you drive under a street, like there's a projection of light underneath it, and you drive through it and you're like, oh, okay. And you kind of associate that much light radiating from a street light.
Right, yeah.
This was brighter than a street light, but it didn't give off as much light as a street light, which it's kind of hard for me to explain that. I mean, it was really kind of weird because it was like, it was bright enough for you to really see very easily, and you could distinguish that the light was different from a street light because it was brighter, but yet it didn't seem to give off as much directed light.
I get what you mean. The one I saw, it was more of an internal light, and it isn't like a flashlight. It isn't like a normal light. I know what you mean when it's kind of internally. What do you think it was?
For me, I almost think it might be like ball lightning. I really couldn't tell you, but I got to tell you, it was really an odd thing to see. The fact that it disappeared or exploded or ceased to exist, and then my radio went wonky. I'm assuming it had some type of electromagnetic property to it. You know, I mean, that would explain why the radio would kind of freak out for a minute or two. But and again, it was very, because it was so directed, like it literally followed the power lines. I mean, it was a straight, it wasn't wobbling. It was, right on target with those power lines. So I don't know if it was like ball lightning that was captured like in the electromagnetic field of the power lines, or if it was some type of intelligence because it moved very, angularly along those lines. I couldn't tell you, Wes, but it was really kind of...
It's bizarre, isn't it?
Well, the one thing that I've been listening to your show for a while, and I always thought to myself, man, if I ever saw a Bigfoot, the first thing I got to do is don't be amazed by it. Just pick up your phone and take a picture, or that type of thing. I'm like, just don't be in the moment. Like be that like guy who gets the shot. And then I thought, man, you really got to document. If you ever see anything, man, you got to document it. So, man, when I got home, of course, I didn't take a picture like a dork, but. When I got home, I was like, okay, I really got to document this so I can remember it exactly the way it happened.
Yeah, and the email you sent me was pretty well documented. It is fascinating to see it. It makes you wonder what those things are. If there was a ball of lightning or if there's something more sinister going on, but it's so hard to tell. I know you're fighting allergies, so thanks again for coming on. But let me ask you real quick, what do you think that Sasquatch is, Steve?
Well, to be honest, I really think if you look at Neanderthal, or you look at the big ape from Asia,
right? Gigantopithecus, yeah.
Gigantopithecus. Thank you. I really do think that it's probably those. I mean, when you look at the behaviors and it just seems very, very, very primate-like, very human-like. But there is some high strangeness that's associated with that. So my first inclination is to think it's some type of relic hominid that is really, really good at avoiding us because it's had generations to know that humans are bad news. We're not the king of the forest, but when, 100 people go in with sticks and guns, we are the king of the forest, So I think that they've gotten to the point where they realize that if as a species, just like other animals, if we end up, encountering them, we're going to have problems. So I think that they're very, very intelligent animals that have a very, very strong instinct to avoid us.
Yeah, you could be right. It's hard to say what these things are. And, that's why I love asking that question. You'll get a million different answers, but it's fun to theorize on what they are. And with regard to the ball of light, I don't know what that is. It could have been a ball of lightning, could have been something more sinister. It's so hard to say what they are. A lot of people see them, but I find it fascinating. It exploded above your car. Steve, I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time to share, what happened to you when you were young and then with the ball of light. Thank you again.